On the 12th day of Sinsmas, I got from my MP pain and a partridge.
Box bites.
Happy holidays, y'all. 'Tis the season for sought-after endings and fresh beginnings. And while I have no problem saying adios to the previous year, which I have quite the hellish rebuke for, at least we've got Helluva Boss Season 2, Episode 12, Sinsmas, to send us off on a good note. While I'll save my full feelings on IMP's second go-round for future videos, I'd be a liar if I said it didn't have its unforgettable moments and series-defining icons. But is their final entry one of them? Well, let's dive in Okay, look guys, I wrote this intro before the actual review as a way to sorta get a head start before the episode came out, and I had a feeling it would be good and festive, warm and cozy, hell of a holiday vibe, and the season right. But no, guys, no. This isn't your run-of-the-mill Christmas special. This is everything I asked for. It's everything everyone probably asked for. It's got a few hiccups, sure, but everything big is done competently at worst and perfectly at best. It's sad, it's happy, it's hopeful, it's tragic, it's conclusive, it's incomplete. It made me love Helluva Boss again. I always really liked it, but not since Truth Seekers and maybe Mammon's musical episode have I felt this much raw emotion for the series. I've got a lot to say, so sorry if this video feels a little disjointed or all over the place, but just know that these words aren't coming from only a reviewer, they're coming from a fan. A die-hard, rejuvenated fan of many, many years. Merry Sinsmas, you beautiful animals, let's get this show on the road. Long story short, Stolitz and Blitz are roomies now, with Big Bird being big-time broke and literally getting isolated from his daughter. Stolitz tries to live a normal life in true lower-class fashion, even decking himself out in some lower-class fashion, but he only falls deeper into depression until he eventually decides to see little Via for himself, regardless of what the law has to say. Cue a huge fight against Andrealphus, with Via saving her dad, much in the same way that he saved Blitz last episode, but when Stolitz tries to reconnect with her, well, she shuts him out. The mixed signals and trauma she's endured is just too much, and she can't hack it anymore. She turns away and moves on with their life, leaving him to also move on without her. Then we get a scene that, well, I'll talk about it later. This episode made me happier than most animation I've seen this year, so I think the best place to start is with the character who best embodies that happiness. Our main man who started as a top on the bottom and then finally came out on top. The pure, positive, good vibes that emanated from Blitz all throughout this episode were just infectiously enjoyable. This is a guy who has been put through the emotional ringer throughout the series, some might argue more than necessary, but at this moment, aside from a decent salary, he basically has everything he needs. His business is slowly growing, he's admired by his peers, he has confirmation from all his friends and loved ones that they're not going anywhere and that their bonds are more than transactional, his daughter calls him dad on the regular, his best friend and honorary little brother are no longer victims of his stalker syndrome and instead just friends to pal around with, and above all else, he finally feels certain of his new romantic relationship. Yes, there is definitely an argument to be made that the Stolitz relationship wasn't built up the best during the season, with Mastermind coming off as a payoff to a build-up that was barely realized. Heck, I planned to discuss it in a massive episode 11 analysis that sadly just never came out. If you want to know why, I'll just say I would have asked Rich Pigeon to pass the pill bottle a few times this year, if you get what I mean. But overall, I can't deny that the end result of Blitz just being happy for once made me feel so warm inside that I'm willing to let it pass. I think Blitz has suffered more than enough for him to finally have some time where he can just enjoy existing. And the way that he tries to be such a sweet boyfriend to Stolas, despite having a limited frame of reference for what he's going through and being years out of practice, is incredibly sweet. And hey, this time we actually get to see clear examples of, well, as Stoly Boy would put it,
I've tried so fucking hard to spend time with you, to support you.
While we're on the topic, by the way, Stolas, as much as I love and cherish our time together, as much as I understand your trauma-laden position and wish you all the best, Even you have to admit that you kinda needed this. You had a pretty arduous classist mindset throughout the series, albeit one you probably weren't fully aware of due to your personal issues, that definitely needed to be put in its place. So the fact that you're now forced to live in borderline poverty without all the wealthy amenities you used to know is a wake-up call equivalent to your diamond-studded alarm clock hitting you square in the forehead and shattering on impact. You took your position and the people around you for granted in many ways. And whether you were malicious in your intentions or not, they were still actions that the universe is now forcing you to compensate for. Heck, there's an awesomely designed Karen sinner who shows up just to yell about her husband who left her for another man and quote-unquote poisoned her daughters with his degeneracy. You can look me in the eye and say that the universe doesn't have a sixth sense of humor after seeing something like that. Speaking of daughters, yeah, remember that Stolitz has one of those? Because he sure didn't. Another point I would have made in my Mastermind review, which maybe I'll get around to releasing one day, is that regardless of what Stolitz's intentions were when he laid down his head in Blitz's stead, he never once thought about certain things he would be leaving behind if the execution actually went through. Not once did he even consider the fact that he would be leaving his daughter alone in the hands of someone who clearly couldn't care less about her. And we know this is true because it's only during the beginning of this episode that Stolitz even remembers, "Oh shoot, I forgot about my dang daughter." And while we'll get into Octav's role in the story later, the scene where Stolitz actually confronts his daughter and tries to reconnect with her only to be given the cold shoulder was tragic, but also not unwarranted. I saw some people mention that Via should have heard her dad out, she never listened to his side of the story. A trauma victim refusing to let someone explain due to repeated events involving missing or conflicting information about emotions. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? Just ever so familiar. Again, I understand the context behind Stolitz's choices. I know that what he did in Mastermind was the objective right thing to do. I also understand why Stolitz shut Blitz out during Full Moon. I did a whole analysis of that episode forever ago. But like I said back then, explanations are not excuses. He made promises to his daughter that he was never able to fulfill, and now he's forced to literally face the reality of the situation. Take a good long look in the icy mirror and soak in the gravity of what he's done. It's tragic and incredibly saddening to see this develop, but hey, what can I say? Karma is your boyfriend's daughter, bro, and sometimes it bites like the cold. As for Octi herself, there's a lot to unpack. Like, literally, she unpacks a ton of stuff while wandering around the house, including a few callbacks, which is pretty neat. Anyway, the deep-rooted doubts about her father's sincerity have reached a new low for the poor thing. Partially due to the new dynamic duo keeping Stolitz's calls on permanent hold, but as we said before, also because of Stolitz's actions as a whole. Regardless of intent, he always made his daughter feel like she was only the second most important thing in his life. She'll never be good enough. She'll never be important enough. And if she is, he absolutely does not show that as often as he should. We hear these sentiments echoed in her first song, beautifully titled, "I Will Be Okay." As you'd expect, this acts as a response to one of the best songs in the series from way back in Season 1. Heck, it was even confirmed that the song was written back when Lululand was released, meaning the parallel was planned from the start. And to hear this poor girl essentially give up on her father in musical form is heartbreaking, even stating that she will be okay because she'll one day grow older and stronger into somebody that Stolitz won't even recognize. And by the time she's done, the only thing he'll know her by is her name. He'll know that she's Octavia, but the daughter he once knew, the one he constantly ignored and neglected, will be nothing but a memory left to burn and dissipate. And unlike some of the things Stolitz told her, this song is not just empty promises, as when they finally have their bittersweet reunion near the end of the episode, she literally and proverbially shuts the door on him one final time, solidifying the fact that she just can't take the thought of being ignored again. And while she tries to stand tall and remain certain of that decision, it's clear from this subtle look back that she'll likely be suffering from this separation just as much as her father. Heck, you can call me dark if you want, but I wouldn't put it past her to start trying a few of Stolitz's slothering meds just to numb her own pain. She has those empty bottles after all, she knows where to find the brand. Now, it's true that Stolitz's little outlet is missing a lot of context here. Context we're all aware of that could change her mind if properly laid out. I'm not gonna pretend that Stolitz was entirely in the wrong here, as she claims. But while I don't want to say that Stolitz deserved all this, considering what he's done, he definitely needs this. As of this point in the series, the fairy tale is dead. He's not the fair maiden to be swept off his feet, nor the dashing hero willing to lay down his life in the name of love. This isn't Emberlin's 69th fanfic, this is real life. And in real life, there are more people suffering than just you, buddy, sometimes even caused by your hand. And when you make promises to people and claim that you love them, even when you mean every word, you gotta follow through on it, or it'll just ring hollow and fade into nothing. Just cause you're traumatized does not exempt you from consequences. And if anything, consequences can help you grow and mature into the person you need to be for the ones you love and for yourself. Alright, let's step off that moral high horse and put it back in Blitz's collection. We've got some fun stuff to talk about too. The atmosphere of this episode is exactly what you'd expect it to be. Holly, jolly, bright, colorful, sweet, and saccharine to match the season. Whatever the show, whatever the movie, seeing classic Christmas ambience is always gonna put a massive grin on my face, and the Spindle Horse team did not disappoint. We even get a brief little moment in the human world where Blitz is trying to off that patron's husband I mentioned before, and not only is the Christmas spirit in full swing up here too, but there's a quiet wholesome moment when we see the husband and his new partner just playing with their two daughters, clearly in a happier and healthier place because of it. And after seeing what could be in those smiling merry faces, he decides to call off the job and just let them be. It's a little corny and heavy-handed, I guess, but it fits with the spirit of the season, and it's a nice way to show how much Blitz has changed since the beginning of the series, going from having no qualms with killing a family to seeing himself in one. His empathy is no longer hidden behind his trauma-laced walls, and he's willing to let others be happy just like he is now. Even Moxxie's response to the victims being a family is much more quiet, subdued, and confident compared to the overly emotional mess of a possum he was back in episode 1. And Loona calling Blitz dad and offering to do the job for him is just the icing on the fruitcake. It's not my favorite part of the episode, we'll get to that later, but dang is it drenched in sticky but sweet Christmas syrup, and I love it. I also just really like the concept of Sinsmas as a whole. Having a holiday where demons exorcise their native sins, kinda like how the holiday season involves a lot of people from different cultures sharing their native traditions with friends and family. It's a lot more commonplace now for different folks from different strokes to have their unique traditions be heard and celebrated. And despite being named after Christmas, Sinsmas is kinda like a conglomerate of December holidays as a whole, and I think that's really nice. Mox and Mill are the main two who really get into the season, with them being playfully wrathful towards one another, as that is the ring they're both from, but it would be nice to see some other characters celebrate this holiday too. Like maybe have some Helluva Boss shorts where we see what Ozzy, Fizz, Verosica, and even the Seven Deadlies do for the holiday season. It's definitely a thought if they want to try something for next year. As with most HB eps, there is a big fight scene, this time against Andrealphus' massive three-headed serpent. Stop laughing. And while it's not the show's most iconic battle, it's got its cute quirks. Like Millie and Moxxie swapping weapon specialties, a kinda maybe callback to Spring Broken with this high five joke, and some gags that didn't deflate the tension and genuinely made me laugh. Like Andrealphus' bleeped out swear word, Stolas just wailing on him out of nowhere, and Blitz saving the day with his most dangerous weapon yet. Frozen water.
Stop throwing snowballs!
I'll admit that Loona turning into a feral-looking hellhound definitely felt like it came out of nowhere and was just there for rule of cool. Like, when was it even hinted at that she could do that? And the whole, "you saved my life," well, you saved me first, bit was kinda on the nose, but hey, a cool scene is still a cool scene, and it did lead to that much-needed ending conversation with Stolitz and Octi that I talked about. So all in all, good stuff. This scene right here is pretty funny and kind of familiar. I mean, you don't think they saw my... They probably... Nah, but it is funny to think about, right? But if you want to know the part that solidified this episode as one of my big favorites, it would have to be the ending. After it hits Stolitz that he may not see his daughter for 100 years, they don't try to lighten the mood with a joke or a gag, they just slowly transition to a Sinsmas party that gets held at the apartment that night. It's kind of like a way to show that, Yeah, the situation is very unfortunate, but life does have to move on. And hey, there are still some ways for you to be happy and people who truly care about you. We get to see Loona socializing with some buddies of hers, a stark difference to how awkward she was in Queen Bee, and even popping out a six-pack of sweet nectar from that episode's breakout star. Looney's grown up so much, and I am all here for it. And speaking of growth, it looks like there's gonna be something growing inside of one of our IMP mainstays. Yeah, let's just cut to the chase. Millie is pregnant. As if her little morning sickness and mood swing bits didn't make that clear enough before she pulled out the test. And I swear I felt the planet shake for a moment as every fan on Earth let out a magnitude 10 squeal of joy. Moxxie and Millie are gonna be parents. The only question is, are they gonna be ready for that? As much as I want to see Eminem squeeze out a wee one, a kid is a massive responsibility, especially for a couple that aren't exactly making bank. And honestly, it would be really nice to see the pair that are often depicted as functionally flawless endure one of the events that tends to make or break couples. It's something that leaves me both overjoyed and extremely worried, so I guess we'll see what Season 3 has in store for these two. And of course, there's a Stolitz moment to bookend this episode and this entire season. But it's not quite as beautiful as you would expect. Blitz and Stolas meet up on the balcony, with Stolas obviously being very distraught over the events of the day and even being a little passive-aggressive in some aspects, like when Blitz asks him for a cigarette. The two of them talk about saving each other's lives and how much they sacrificed for one another, but it's Stolas' word choice in this scene that really gets me. Like the way he talks about how Blitz doesn't need to feel any guilt for a situation, and equating the act of sacrificing their lives for one another to them being even, so to speak. It feels like the same transactional mindset that Blitz had once upon a time, and the way he blames everything that happened solely on himself, even if not all of it can be blamed on him, is also reminiscent of Blitz's trauma response. When you pair this with Blitz being a lot more happy and openly romantic, hugging Stolas sweetly without any euphemisms, innuendos, or swears so you know he really meant it, it almost feels like the duo have switched roles in a very loose way. I'm not saying that Blitz is in some kind of romantic fairy tale of his own now, it's clear that he still has both feet on the ground, but it's interesting to see the outward sweet romantic and the doubtful closed off loner roles be given to the opposite partners, even if it is loose. And after a really cute dance scene between the two, we get an absolutely perfect shot to end things on, with Blitz warmly hugging Stolas, smiling and content, while Stolas just stands there, cold and unfeeling, without looking down, hugging back, or even smiling a little. It really lets the feeling sink in that it's now Stolas that might be having doubts about the relationship, instead of being 100% certain that they belong together like he was once upon a time. All the things he left behind, what he had to lose and sacrifice to get here, was it all worth it? He now has exactly what he thought he wanted a long time ago, but at what cost? It's honestly depressing, but in a good way. Like I said, Christmas is the season for both endings and beginnings, but that doesn't mean those things are guaranteed to all be happy. Sometimes they'll be sad, sometimes they'll be anger-inducing, and sometimes they'll just be neutral. You don't really know how to feel or what to do, and you even kind of dread what might be waiting for you come the same time next year. The look on Stolas' face, that gaze of total uncertainty, is honestly so emblematic of what Helluva Boss Season 3 might bring. Possible tragedy, conflict, new friends, new enemies, maybe happiness if we're lucky? We don't really know. But this is how things are at the moment, so the most we can do is just accept it and see what happens. When I say that Sinsmas did everything right, I mean everything that really matters. Of course it's not a flawless episode, there are some inconsistencies and small problems you could point out, but as a season finale, as a reminder of what this show means to its fans, as a last entry in an experimental and controversial season that's had its ups and downs, I think they did everything they could to try and end things properly. Blitz getting his flowers, Stolas getting his reality slap, Octi making a difficult but important life choice, and the rest of the cast showing clear growth from their own arcs this season, with more clearly to come. All of which were done to near perfection, with some moments, exchanges, and shots that could go down in history as some of the show's best. It just feels really nice to love Helluva Boss again. I've always been super supportive of the series. I've followed it, enjoyed it, reviewed it, and constantly kept up with it. But I'd be lying if I said I haven't been losing a little steam over the years. I made it kinda clear in my apology tour video that rewatching the show made a lot of its big flaws very apparent. And while it didn't ruin my watching experience, it did make it a little harder to stay as hyped as I used to be. But Sinsmas did a lot to rekindle that old spark, and made me extremely happy to still be a fan of this franchise. Through all the trials and tribulations, the good and the bad, I've still stuck around. And I'm gonna continue to stick around. For Helluva Boss, for Has-Been Hotel, probably for anything that Vivzie puts out. Cause in spite of the artistic flaws on display, this just seems like a really happy, hardworking group of folks that want to make something funny and entertaining. And while I'd struggle to call them masters of their craft, it's clear that they're trying their best. And when they manage to really get on their A game, their series is truly the gift that keeps on giving. So those are my thoughts on Sinsmas. While I'm not sure where I'd put it in my overall series ranking, it's definitely one that's worthy of at least a top 10 spot just for the effort and emotion alone. This obviously won't be the end of Helluva Boss content for me. In fact, I've got one really interesting thing coming up if you want to check out my community tab, but for now, tell me what you guys think. Am I giving Sinsmas more praise than it deserves, or are you also confident in saying that it capped off this divisive season really well? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and again, check out my community tab because I might need your help with a special video coming up soon. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Happy holidays, and I hope to see you all real soon.